Hi, welcome. This is the second part of the past video that the main topic was mental health and migration. And reflecting on migration and mental health for this presentation, the main points or the core concept the authors are trying to convey. The core book chapters argue that migration is only a changeful place or a deep cultural and psychological transition. It's just like they can use distinct kinds of stress of loss and acculturative stress. The stress produced when migrants' cultural systems meet the host. Social culture operates through the social reflection, and with migrants, operates through social rejection, loss of status, generation tensions, and structural barriers. This stress realizes risks of substance misses, suicidal behavior, and the other mental health problems if not recognized and addressed. Some Bhugra, Wojcik, and Gupta complement that by naming and unpacking cultural bereavement, culture shock, and cultural conflict. In cultural bereavement, describes the grief of lost social structures and rituals. Culture shock is the immediate disorientation and raw confusion after arrival and cultural conflict arises when values between generates or groups clash. So these phenomena overlap, interact with pre-migration vulnerability, and influence whether a migrant adapts, like the integration, the assimilation, separation, and marginalization, or develops clinical symptoms. And why? Why this point? It's because the others want clinicians and public health professionals to see cultural process as central drivers of mental health, not as peripheral background. It's more like recognizing this process changes diagnosis, risk assessment, and therapeutic approaches. And if was anything unclear or confusing for me in these readings, and how could I solve this? There are two really gaps to how they would benefit from clear operational detail. And the first is it, the word is heterogeneity. Yeah, heterogeneity of migrant experiences, and these chapters emphasize categorizes like refugee, immigrant, and sojourner. So, in demographic moderators like the age, gender, and the education, where here they sometimes treat groups as uniform. In practice, legal status migration pathway like forced versus voluntary. Intersectional identities like race, language, and local policy shape accounts in complex ways. To clarify, a short stability framework may pan a migration pathway for legal status for available social supports. These contours likely stress profile will make clinical triage clearer. And then the framework should include concrete screening items like ability to perform cultural rights, and family separation and language barrier discrimination experiences. And from the other point is theory to measurable clinical tools, and these the concepts like cultural bereavement and acculturative stress are powerful but risk being used vaguely. To make them clinically useful, we need validated screening questions and thresholds. For example, frequency of intrusive bereavement images, ability to access culturally meaningful mourning practices, extent of perceived rejection by host community, and developing short screening models like 4 of 8 items and integrating them to intake interviews will convert the theory into practice. And the matter of why this matters, it's like precise operationalization would improve detection and avoid misdiagnosis like pseudo hallucinations tied to bereavement, and guide referrals. Referrals. And these chapters themselves were clinicians about misdiagnosis and guide cultural competence, but stopping their lives in a practical gap. And what was new or changed my mind of thinking with these readings, and probably that I was talking in a few seconds, like bereavement. Beyond that, I learned to widen my understanding of great cultural bereavement. It's grief for loss of a cultural world, rituals, authority figures, community practices, not only for people. These reframe certain symptoms that might look psychotic or depressive, intrusive images, got supernatural experiences as culturally meaningful grief rather than automatic pathology. That insight reduces my inclination to medicalize immediately and increases attention to cultural rituals and community-based healing. And acculturation can replicate host population harms, like the chapters document that with increasing acculturation, some migrant groups adopt the risk profile of the host population. Higher substance use, sharing society rates across generations, and changing patterns of mental illness. Example, like Mexican American trends in alcohol and suicide rates. This reframes integration policies discussions, and integration must be accompanied by protective measures and culturally sensitive public health efforts. This is what I think, how it links to other learning. Maybe this idea connect with social determinants of health and frameworks and cultural psychiatric models that we study, and they make clear that epidemiology, clinical care, and policy must be aligned. And what would I like to explore further and why? There are areas I like to pursue, because screening tool development and validation create concise validated screening instruments for cultural bereavement, and acculturative strategy can be used in primary care and community mental health settings. And why? Early detection in non-specialist settings prevents escalation and misdiagnosis. This is what I think. The chapters have a clinical application but do not provide concrete measures. Then the interventions that are community-led and bidirectional study programs where house and migrant community co-design mental health supports. Example, the community navigators, culturally adapt ZVT, ritual campaign programs, and the authors recommend bidirectional transfer of knowledge. Testing models will show that what reduces acculturative stress, and intergenerational dynamic and resilience. Examine how families navigate different cultural speeds, acculturation speeds. So, like the children acculturate faster than parents, identify and protective factors, then prevent cultural conflict, leading to self-harm of eating disorders. Because both chapters link family conflict to clinical outcomes, but detailed longitudinal studies will guide family-based interventions. And one specific personal or professional example linked to the readings is during my life in school. I saw a middle-aged woman who had recently migrated and presented with insomnia, intermittent panic, and persistent guilt about abandoning her elderly father. So, also reporters and vivid images of family riddles to not her from here. And initially, Trish considered a generalized anxiety disorder and started the standard anxiolytic plan with this type of medicines and pharmacologic therapy. And after applying the readings lens, uh, I took a deeper history, forced migration and ability to perform mourning rites and social isolation. So, really redirecting her to include referral to a bilingual community culture session to recreate rural elements locally. And her symptoms improved after psychosocial interventions were added. This case made me think that the rings are made for this, recognizing cultural bereavement, altered diagnosis and treatment, and led to more human effective care. So that's everything for these questions. These are all the questions that I obligated to respond to answer. But if I could add a general conclusion, maybe practical next steps include developing brief screening tools, training providers in cultural competence, and co-creating interventions with migrant communities so care is both clinically sound and culturally meaningful. Doing so respects migrants' dignity and reduces avoidable suffering. So always be kind. Always.